Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We have a great show to send you into the weekend today on GoJo and Golic. It finally happened. Brandon Aiyuk signed his deal. We will get into the details on that one. And Deion Sanders and the Buffaloes barely survived last night. Is it going to be a tale as old as time this year? The same thing we saw last year. We'll get into all that. Plus, Rowe is going to join us to talk about college football week 1. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield on a Friday with you guys. We got a great show coming up, as always. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. You heard Jesse say it. Rowe going to stop by later on. One of the best in the business, one of the sideline reporters that focuses most on the offensive line when she calls games, and so thus one of my favorites from over the years. Dad obviously has worked with Holly a ton. And Jordan Brenner going to stop by, one of the co-hosts of the Underdogs podcast here at Meadowlark Media and on the DraftKings Network. Help us take a look at college football week 1. We are here. We kicked off last night. We will get to what we saw from Deion's Colorado. Travis Hunter, spoiler alert, continues to be worth the price of admission on a flawed but incredibly talented team. But Dad, our national nightmare is over. We have been on this show and on every show that you've seen across the country waiting for months to see what the hell the San Francisco 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk were finally going to do. And yesterday, they put pen to paper. Brandon Aiyuk agrees to terms on a 4-year, $120 million contract extension that's going to keep him in San Francisco through 2028 and pay him $76 million guaranteed, with $47 million of that to come to Brandon Aiyuk before April 1st of next season. So, Dad, better, worse, or about the same in terms of what you were expecting from this deal all along?
Actually, a little better. I thought he would be in the mid to high 20s, probably the high 20s, more along the Jalen Waddle $28.5 million dollars per year. But I mean, when you're at that amount, what does it matter? Obviously, it matters for cap numbers and how you manipulate the cap. They now have 8 players that are making at least $15 million, the only team in the league to do so. So they haven't even paid. And a reason you can do that is because you haven't paid your quarterback yet, and that's going to end next offseason. So the stuff is really going to hit the fan next year as far as trying to manage the cap that they're already over technically for next year. So, but what was odd here to me, maybe it was just a missing camp thing, but it seemed like more than a missing camp thing with all the machinations that Brandon Aiyuk went through of pictures with Jaden Daniels and tweets to Mike Tomlin and really the thoughts of getting out of there, because as Adam Schefter reported, this was the exact same deal that was on the table 3 months ago. I mean, the exact same deal. So I mean, at $30 million a year, again, that was a little more than I thought. So maybe Aiyuk was even wanting more money than that, because like I said, the maneuvers he went through seemed like more than just, I want to miss training camp guy by the social media posts and things that he had. So that was a bit of a head scratcher that it was the exact same contract. At least that's what's reported that was on the deal on the table 3 months ago.
Yeah, you know what, Dad, that tells me is the 49ers held their line. They had an idea of what his value was. And when you look at where he slots amongst other wide receivers, right, in terms of average annual value, he's tied for 5th with Tyreek Hill at $30 million a year. So he's above Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, what we saw and thought might be instructive from earlier this offseason with Devonta Smith and the Eagles, who signed for, about this much, but prorated with less year. Brandon Aiyuk got the 4th year, whereas some of these other wideouts that we saw get signed got 3 years and a different bump in guaranteed money because of that. And so they had an idea in their head of what Brandon Aiyuk was worth. And then, Dad, it can come down to this sometimes. For Brandon Aiyuk, we knew about the trade talk, whether it was the Cleveland Browns that were involved in a little bit, the Steelers, the Washington Commanders, the Patriots. they had deals on the table. The 49ers said, hey, you can go out and get a deal and we'll go and work with a trade partner, but you got to actually want to leave. And there's part of me that wonders if in the midst of all this, even in the name of trying to go and secure a greater payday and see if you can draw more money out of the 49ers, if they just called the bluff on Brandon Aiyuk saying, hey, we've been going at the Super Bowl darn near every year you've been here. Do you really want to forsake that opportunity for marginally more money at a place that might not be able to maximize your skill set is what this seems to reek of.
Yeah, because I can't, because they talked about in other places there was actual money deals in place. I can't imagine they were for much more than this because, again, this is higher than I thought he was going to get. So I can't imagine any monetary deal, whether it was New England, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the teams that were talked about in the trade that had a contract ready to go, was much more than 4 for 120 and 76 guaranteed and 47 to be paid by next April 1st. So it is a bit of a head scratcher that it went through the process it went through. Quite honestly, again, I still think it's a little much, but when you're talking about a mill and a half, I mean, what's the big deal? But we know, and this was the offseason of the receiver too. So many receivers signed, and he slots in at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 6th, tied for 5th with Tyreek Hill, arguably, right there with Justin Jefferson as the best wide receiver in the league. So I think he got himself a hell of a deal. It's just again odd, all the kind of twists and turns that went with it, with other teams involved in trade talks.
Yeah, this definitely swung wilder than most we see because, to your point, the social media stuff, that flirtation online, that has kind of become part of contract negotiation for players. We see the unfollowings that go on and all these different things. But the full-on, hey, here are the trade proposals on the table. Let's play with the cards up in the media on this was fascinating. I know the thing we always focus on with NFL contracts and the thing we always caution everybody is, hey, 4 years, 120 sounds great. What's actually guaranteed in these deals? And even if you slice it up like that, Brandon Aiyuk is tied for 6th with Jalen Waddle in terms of the practical guarantees in his contract with $76 million. We knew, hey, Justin Jefferson, $110 million guaranteed. The outlier, CeeDee Lamb, not far behind him at $100 million. And then A.J. Brown, third, a distant third, at just a paltry $84 million guaranteed. But so you see Brandon Aiyuk much closer to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got $77 million guaranteed. DJ Moore at $81.5. So slotted about where you would expect given production. Had a monster season last year where he took that next step forward. And for Brandon Aiyuk, we talked about the reward for a player who had grown in your system. He was a highly picked player that started off in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse early on and grew into everything you could want out of a Shanahan-McVay receiver. Not only someone that could exist outside of structure, but someone who's willing to go and do the dirty work blocking that these offenses require from you. So it's a good success story in that way. It just took a little while to get to because, like you said, hey man, their books are stocked full of tons of money going out, and they got to do some, as you've always said, clever accounting to make sure it works before the quarterback gets on the books next year. So now they can turn their attention to Trent Williams, Dad. I'd imagine that gets done pretty quickly after this, considering his importance to this team.
I would think so. I would think that would get done. Well, with the Aiyuk thing, you're right, where he's slotted with guaranteed money. Again, it was just weird that there was so much trade talk involved in it. But and I thought it was more important to get CeeDee Lamb signed for Dallas since he's really their only weapon, as opposed to, even though Aiyuk led the team in receptions, I think with 75, there were 3 other guys in the 60s, Debo and McCaffrey, or at least 2, and Kittle in the 60s of reception. So they obviously, we talk about the depth of their talent on offense is one of the best in the league. So I felt if the asking price was too high, they could have lived without Aiyuk, who had done everything you ask of a guy picked where he was, as you mentioned, in the doghouse for a while, but then absolutely productive for them. And as I mentioned, they're the only team with 8 players earning an average annual salary of $15 million or more. The 8th one in the $15 million slot is actually George Kittle, the tight end. So it is good they got it done, but Trent Williams in my eyes is more important than
I would
Brandon
agree.
Aiyuk. It's great great to get Brandon Aiyuk, but Trent Williams, you have got to get him back. I know he's 36, but he still grades out as one of the top, if not the top O-lineman. Got to get him back.
Yep, I'm with you. And it's a good reminder that none of this exists in a vacuum, right? It can be true that Brandon Aiyuk simultaneously deserves richly what he got, but also, given the context of that offense, is in a difficult position, like a lot of other people in those offenses, if the skill is not easy to see on tape for us, the way it is. Hey, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, boom, go fast. Even in an offense that's similar, that's afforded a lot by their play caller, boom, go fast always pops enough to get you paid. For CeeDee Lamb, you were sitting there on an island. You've got such a gulf between you and the rest of that team that absolutely that was going to be an easier payday to come by. So we'll wait on Trent Williams' watch, but also, Jesse, as the world turns, we might as well stare at the other big shiny object in the sky. In the Dallas Cowboys, who had an interesting back and forth between Jera and their star quarterback, Dak Prescott, yesterday.
Yeah, so Dak's still waiting, right? We're still waiting on his big contract to come through. And we know that Jerry Jones doesn't have a problem running his mouth to the media, which is exactly what he did on Wednesday.
If you hadn't seen it by now, you haven't seen it. And so I'm such a fan of Dak's and appreciate all of the great things that we all know that he's there. And I appreciate his work ethic probably more than anything out here. When you look at a situation, you've also got to weigh, okay, what are the consequences of the other side of the coin?
Yeah, I understand that. That's the business and the nature of this game that we play. I stopped, honestly, listening to things that he says to the media a long time ago. So it doesn't really hold weight with me.
Dak saying what a lot of people are thinking about GM Jerry, who will just say whatever pops into his head at the moment in front of the media.
Yeah, Dad, this unsurprising, and I think seeing the smirk from Dak there kind of softens the blow of the way this reads on paper, because it's more so, hey, I know the Jerry in this building and the guy I'm negotiating with, and I, like a lot of other people, know the showman that you guys all see in the media that's kind of doing this always with an ulterior motive in mind, at least how I read this. What did you make of this back and forth where we're at currently with these two?
This is just, again, CeeDee Lamb we waited too long for. Dak Prescott, we're waiting too long. While Dak's salary this year, his base salary is $29 million, he's $55 million against the cap. I can't imagine with a new deal he's going to be much more than that against the cap, right? I mean, you're going to try and keep that number down by making it a longer-term contract. He's 31, but we see quarterbacks playing well into their 30s and playing well. So this sounds like a Dak Prescott who is tired of talking about it, is a little frustrated that this is the second time he's waiting for his deal to get done, and others have been done before him, kind of treated like the non-first round quarterback that he was, right? Getting treated like the fourth rounder and not maybe shown the respect. And I don't know if he's thinking that way or not, but it is the second time that he's had to wait while other players have been signed. And like I said, it's about giving out a ton of money, but the cap number I don't see with the extension being that much higher than $55 million. So from a cap standpoint, I don't think it's going to cost you or be against your cap an awful lot more. It's just going to be a hell of a lot of new money.
Oh, listen, no, this is like prudent financial planning would have been to extend him a long time ago. Extending him is the thing that alleviates your financial distress in terms of the salary cap. It is a lot of money, though, because to your point, he's going to make well over $55 million a year. If you sign him at this point, I'd imagine we're pushing 60 already in Dallas. And if we get to the open market, we're blowing through that number and getting into probably the low $60 million a year. I've seen David Hellman talk about the fact that it could be one of those Kirk Cousins style shorter term fully guaranteed contracts. Right. This thing that NFL owners have been very, very hesitant to want to even broach again after the Deshaun Watson fiasco. But we have never seen what we could potentially see with a player like Dak Prescott without the controversy associated. You'd be talking about getting a premium quarterback still at the height of his powers off a season where he finished second in the MVP voting and the open market and that chance to go and make him a part of your team. These guys just don't come available like that. So I'm with you, Dad. It would be the smart move for them to extend him. Dak Prescott sounds like a player who has been around and done this. Because we talked about this the other day when we had Hellman on. Hey, listen, if you're Micah Parsons, this has all got to be big and scary. Because you come here, you're their top pick. You've been incredible, one of the best defensive players in the league so far. And you're looking up and seeing them do CeeDee Lamb like this, the guy that's basically allowed Dak Prescott and the offense to subsist in terms of production. And you're wondering, what the hell? Am I going to have to go through this? And Dak's looking over there, Bud, like that meme of the guy sitting up there at the stockade, like, oh, is this your first time? Like, Dak's been through this before. He knows what it's like to be pushed back in negotiations, and he knows the bottom line is only what's written on the page, not what Jerry says in front of the mic.
But eventually they do get their money, right? Zach Martin held out for a bit and got his money. CeeDee Lamb held out for a bit and got his money. Dak, the last time we went through this, got his money. Micah Parsons is going to get his money. It just seems like you're made to work for. It's the wrong word because it's not usually during the season, but it just seems to be more of a process with the Cowboys and with Jerry Jones. But eventually these guys do make their money. So you have to, at the end of the day, you have to give Jerry credit for at least that the guys do get the money that put them in the upper echelon at their position.
No, there's no doubt. And you're right. It does eventually happen. And that's the other thing Dak Prescott can probably say is he puts an arm around Micah Parsons right now, worrying about his future, going, hey, it's going to come eventually. They're not going to let you leave. They're going to take care of you, but you've seen the road to go. For some reason, this organization, for the dog and pony show, and again, if you're Jerry Jones' dad, while I don't think correlation is causation, and that because Jerry Jones chooses to make every negotiation a media circus that drags out, that this is why the Dallas Cowboys remain this America's team big show, and the valuations go up, and all that stuff. Like, I don't think you can draw a direct line through that as much as Jerry probably feels justified in doing at this point. If you're him, at this point, you feel justified in operating exactly how you've operated because it has made you a whole lot of money. We talk about incentives all the time for players, for plenty of people. It's, hey, I have done things a certain way for a while, and if it works for me and it lines my pockets, I'm going to keep doing those things. So that is, as the world turns down in Jerry world, we'll see if and that one much less likely, I think we all think, to get resolved at this point because of the leverage that Dak Prescott holds in this situation. Again, going all the way back to the Brandon Aiyuk conversation, hey, it's a lot different animal when you're faced with leaving one of the best teams in the NFL for maybe $3 or $4 million more a year.
You just wonder, and I don't know if Dak has the personality to say, screw it. I'm playing for me now. I'm not signing anything, and I'm going to be a free agent. There are quarterbacks with attitudes like that. I don't know if Dak is like that. I think Dak likes it in Dallas. I think he obviously likes his teammates. He thinks they can continue winning there. So I think if the number is right, he will sign and wouldn't wait for free agency. Though I think a lot of people, especially other quarterbacks, would love him to wait for free agency.
Yeah, we will wait and see there what happens with Dak Prescott. And like we said, we have a great show coming up the rest of the day for you guys here. But we'd be remiss this morning if we didn't pump the brakes for the second and just send our condolences to the Gaudreau family here. Incredibly sad news coming out overnight through the NHL family. The Columbus Blue Jackets putting out a statement released by that team that Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew died Thursday night tragically. Reports are they were killed while biking Thursday night in Oldsman Township in New Jersey near their hometown. Johnny Gaudreau was 31 years old, dad, a former BC hockey star, former top player in college. Johnny Hockey, loved by so many people, spent 9 years in Calgary before making his way over here to the Columbus Blue Jackets, had history with Team USA, and just a devastatingly sad moment for the NHL community, for the Blue Jackets and Flames family, but also just the Gaudreau family, who lost two of their sons, who was also a father and a husband in the same time. Just devastating. So our condolences to them.
It's just horrible. He and his brother were set to be groomsmen in their sister Katie's wedding Friday today in Philly. Gaudreau's wife, Meredith, was listed as a maid of honor. He leaves two kids behind. I mean, it's just a horrific accident.
Yep. So our thoughts and prayers certainly go out to, again, their hockey family, their actual family, and everyone who knew and loved Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, gone far, far too soon. We'll be back after this with more on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Deion Sanders' Buffaloes survived a scare in their season opener. They eked out the win 31-26, but Lord, it was not pretty, okay? North Dakota State led 2017 at halftime after scoring on each of their first 4 possessions. Shedeur Sanders completed 26 of 34 passes for 444 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was outstanding. 3 of those went to two-way star Travis Hunter. And after his impressive night, Hunter's odds to win the Heisman, they moved from plus 5,000 to plus 2,500. Here's what Deion had to say after the game.
We wanted to win decisively, and if we wouldn't have given up that last touchdown, it would have looked better. But we're not for looks, man. We the W or the L. That's what you remember. You guys could pick it apart, and you ladies, I apologize, all you want, but you're here for the W or L. Some of you got upset that we got the W. Some of you, I'm really mad that we didn't get the L. So God bless you all. You have to wait again till next week.
And pick it apart we will. I mean, what did you guys think of the opener? A lot of the same problems from last year seem to be rearing their head again. That defense was terrible.
It was, Dad. It was better in the second half than it was in the first half.
Yeah.
We saw North Dakota State is one of the blue chip programs at the FCS level. So I wasn't surprised that they came out and were buttoned up along the lines of scrimmage, had a quarterback that could affect you with his legs and their backup that they would bring in often in short yardage situations, and had a defense that wasn't going to present you a ton of looks, but was going to roll bodies through along the front 7, get after the quarterback the way that they did at the beginning of the season, where Dad, I look at this Colorado team and say, this is about what I expected. Some improved personnel along the lines of scrimmage, but that still have a difficult task of coming together in a short amount of time. That Colorado offensive line has better players, as does the defensive line. But on the offensive side especially, you're asked with coming in and trying to gel as a unit in a short amount of time. And so you saw they struggled with some of the twist stunts in games. They struggled with some of the more exotic pressures that North Dakota State threw at them. And Shedeur Sanders was constantly under pressure. And like we saw last year, he can handle it by and large. Like, we'll see over the long time. Attrition is what you worry about with this team, but on the top end, the skill guys are there. I mean, God, the fact that Travis Hunter wasn't even the leading receiver, and yet he's going to have every highlight catch you saw in this game. The tale of this one was my better was better than your better in terms of star wide receiver and the quarterback throwing him the football, which was exactly the case last year. So it is an improved but still flawed team. You saw make some typical week 1 mistakes, at least in my mind. What did you think, Dad?
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely some improvements from last year. You can't expect a brand new, I think 4 new starters on the offensive line. You can't expect them to all of a sudden be miraculously great. They gave up 1 sack, but they gave up a lot of pressures. But it's something Shedeur is used to, is seeing pressure and having to scramble. And Jimmy Horn Jr. led the way with 7 catches for 198 yards. There were some wide open receivers, and Shedeur threw some tight window balls. The 1 touchdown to the corner of the end zone, front corner of the end zone, to Travis the ball was actually a little off target, and Travis Hunter made a fantastic catch. Listen, you said it. Their top end talent is top end. You have two guys that are going to put up stats that are Heisman-esque. I don't know if they'll have the wins to go along with it. But they're going to put up the stats. I mean, Travis Hunter, lest we forget, he's a two-way player, gang. He played 100 plays last night. He plays a cornerback and a wide receiver. He's one of the most versatile athletes we have seen in a while. Their defense, the defense stepped up in the second half. They gave up 6 points in the second half. I thought they did a really nice job after, you understand, it was 20-17 at halftime, and North Dakota State had the ball for over 21 minutes. Colorado only had the ball for 9+ minutes, including their last drive, which started at their 2-yard line, and they got it into field goal range to make it 20-17. So the offense, is gonna strike through the air. The defense was better in the second half. I thought that, for a defense that had given up a ton of points last year, they were definitely better in the second half. Now, there's a big discrepancy in the rushing, 157 for North Dakota State or in that area to 50-something for Colorado. And Deion's line was, well, you got to take what they give you. Well, nobody's loading up to stop Colorado's run. I mean, no, they don't have a running game, so nobody's loading up.
You're also what your weapons say you are, right? And if you're Colorado, your best weapons are your quarterback and your wide receivers. So the run discrepancy
I
doesn't
agree.
actually bother me a ton. I'm not saying you agree with that either.
I agree, but Deion's saying we're going to take what they give us. I'm saying they're not loading up 8 in the box to stop your run. You're smart in using your talent, and your talent is your quarterback and your one wide receiver, maybe two wide receivers, and your passing game. And it showed. And quite honestly, you see Cam Rising in Utah, they have a shutout win 45-0. As they go to the Big 12, he throws 5 touchdowns. And that's what the Big 12 is, right? The Big 12 isn't really known for defense. It's known for a lot of passing yards. The defense has gotten better over the years. Don't get me wrong. The defense is definitely better in the Big 12.
I was going to say, Iowa State in the 3-3-5 revolution would like a word in terms of the last number of years. But I'm with you. The old stereotype about the conference was boom, go points, all that pace and space, which quite honestly has been more SEC as of late. But Colorado, Dad, is going to be able to put up number. If Travis Hunter stays healthy the entire season, we remember last year after the Colorado State game, had to miss some time after some big shots there. If he stays healthy and plays like this, which we've seen when he's on the field, this is what he does. He should win the Heisman. Like, this is insane what he went out. It was basically a one-man wrecking crew, Dad, because when you look at this game, in a lot of ways in the margins, way closer than it should have been. Colorado had 2 bad third down penalties in the first half that led directly to North Dakota State points. A player lining up off sides on a big third down. Shiloh Sanders with a late hit that kept the drive going for North Dakota State. But then in the second half, you look, I mean, Colorado should have scored and gone up a lot earlier, but Shedeur Sanders has a ball go off the calf of a North Dakota State player on the turf near the end zone that bounces up for a random interception. So little things like that, but there was also the poor clock management late in the game. You got 1:41 left with the new 2-minute drill, the 2-minute timeout that we now have in college football, and you got a chance to just run the clock out and give yourself a better chance, and they throw on first down and stop it inexplicably. So there's a bunch of stuff to fine-tune, Dad, and they're going to get the real stress test. This game went about how I expected. Tough out from North Dakota State, who's very good, got out-athleted on the perimeter at some point. Nebraska is going to be the one where we find out exactly what the ceiling is on this team.
Yeah, and Nebraska's starting a true freshman quarterback in Dylan Raiola, who by all accounts has looked really, really good, but he's still a true freshman quarterback. The skilled position advantage obviously is going to go to Colorado in this. And they're going to, listen, they're going to be topical for a while. It then depends on the winning, right? I mean, it's going to go on their depth, because they're very, very top heavy. And if guys start wearing out like Travis Hunter, that's going to have an effect on this team. They're going to be up there for the Heisman, but I don't think they're going to be up there near the end, because it usually goes to a quarterback on the best team who puts up good stats. And while Travis Hunter is a unicorn, he's going to be on maybe a 6-win team, unless people are on the hype train and saying, oh God, this is a 9-win team now. I'm going to say, pull the reins. Let's hold off on that. Let's just wait a minute. But hey, a good start. As Deion said, they would have liked a convincing win, but you take the W, especially in week 1, week 2, when you're just kind of getting your feet wet.
Yeah, the only thing I'd push back on there and saying, Dad, is this would not be a normal bowl-eligible team if things go well for them. This is one that we know gets an outsized amount of attention, and so if you're Travis Hunter doing something already that's a bit of an outlier, and you've got a team that majors in attention in the media, you're going to get a little bit more exposure than most players in his situation would when it comes to an award like the Heisman, where we know, hey, some of that inertia does matter, and he has got that brand name, brand value. As LeBron James, who was watching last night, we know, known college football watcher, said, man, Travis Hunter is ridiculous. LeBron couldn't agree more. Some of the stuff that he put on wax last night is going to haunt that young man from North Dakota State secondary for quite some time. That was a bigger, faster, stronger player that went out there and put it on wax for his coach in a way that I'm sure Deion, when he comes over to the sideline, whispers son, talking to Travis Hunter accidentally, seeing so much of himself in the star player for the Buffaloes who went off in week 1. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We'll take a look ahead at the big slate of college football games coming up in week 1 off the top of the second hour here. Holly Rowe going to join us from ESPN as she gets set to head down to College Station for Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. We'll have Jordan Brenner on from Underdogs as well. But, Dad, looking at the rest of the slate from last night in college football, we knew Colorado was always going to be the most fascinating option. Going up against a team like North Dakota State is a good early season test. But you look elsewhere around the sport last night in terms of some results for teams that we expect to be involved in the conversation going forward. Arkansas, with Bobby Petrino back at the helm as the offensive coordinator there under Sam Pittman, puts up a 70-burger on Arkansas Pine Bluff. The Fighting Tehran Armsteads go out there and have Arkansas score every single drive on them. Bowling Green, I saw, we started off the college football season with a kick return for a touchdown that's going to be the viral highlight everywhere. Emerson Latzia's UCF Golden Knights got a 57-3 win over New Hampshire, and although he texts me saying he's not exactly thrilled with what he saw from KJ Jefferson first rattle out of the box, other ones, NC State ekes out a win. And I say ekes. Western Carolina had a lead on them for a little bit in that game as Grayson McCall comes over. The same with North Carolina, who's dealing with some QB injuries. But, Dad, what did you make the other Big 12 contender, another team like Colorado moving over into the conference this year, in Utah last night, and what you saw from Cam Rising in his first appearance being back out there since being injured over a year ago in the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, I think the Utah fans were happiest that he was done in the second quarter when they were up 35-0. Only threw 15 times, had 5 touchdowns, rushed the ball for 25 yards, where I'm sure every fan, Utah fan, was holding their breath every time he ran the ball. But it's we keep talking about Texas and Oklahoma, but really Texas is a better team. Texas to the SEC. Oregon to the Big Ten, 2 teams that change conferences that could have the best chance to win one, I think, and other analysts think it's Utah and possibly Arizona coming in from the Pac-12. But Utah, they have a tough defense. And as we talked about last segment, the Big 12 now known for a little more for defense. It's not just the airing out of offenses to wide open receivers all over the place, though wide open offenses are still part of the Big 12, but the defenses are better, and Utah brings in an excellent defense. And the sun rises and sets on Cam Rising, and they hope it rises. No pun intended. Actually, there was a pun intended on the rising sun for Cam Rising. So, again, it was Southern Utah, but still efficient looking as they move into, I think they play Baylor next week, get into some conference play. That they're obviously more of a new team going into the Big 12 threat than Colorado is to win the Big 12, but Colorado gets obviously the lion's share of attention.
Yeah, and I think for Colorado, listen, we knew that was going to be a staunch test. There are not a lot of teams that'll schedule North Dakota State the way that they did, so I give them credit for even doing that, knowing the reputation of that team coming in. That's well-deserved. But for Utah and some of these other teams, I mean, Kansas played Lindenwood. You're going to see a bunch of names of colleges you've never heard of before in opening weekend. And so what's the goal then if you are these teams? It's exactly what you described. And I don't mean this as disrespect to these teams taking pay games that are going to help lift their athletic departments, players that are going to try and use this. We've seen plenty of upsets, and we know it's possible. But for teams that are true bona fide contenders, and you and I both believe Utah is, this should be a glorified scrimmage. This is about going and getting live work against a different colored jersey for the first time, because you don't get that in college, and trying to execute at a really high level. Make it clean, get out of there quick. Dad, you know as well as I do, coaches love these games because it's a chance to come in and rip somebody's ass in those meetings because you're all flying high. You got the good score. I remember like it was yesterday. We went in game 1. My last year when we went 12-0, beat up on Navy in Ireland the first game, thought we were doing great. I walked out of that first meeting with our offensive line coach feeling like we had lost the game based on how hard they coached us after that. So it's a great opportunity for that early in the season before, like you said, you hit conference play where Dave Aranda's taking over play calling in Baylor next week now, in a pivotal year for him, and you go on your merry way.
Yeah. It's again, wins that were supposed to be wins. North Carolina State's was a little tougher than would have, maybe should have been against Western Carolina. You do have North Carolina with a win over Minnesota, but Brad Johnson, former NFL quarterback, son is the quarterback at North Carolina. I believe it's his 3rd stop of colleges. He got hurt. He hurt his hip, had to go to the local hospital. So that was a shame. That's obviously with the new season comes injury as well.
Yep. No, unfortunate part of it. You hate to see it anytime, but especially at the beginning of the year after you just finished doing all that work. So hopefully wish him the best and that he can continue his career and get what he wants out of that situation. So again, plenty more college football coming up in the second hour. Good appetizer sampler last night. We had some wings. We had some onion rings. I saw a ranch flight yesterday as a thing they've got somewhere in Missouri. So consider last night the ranch flight for college football's opening weekend in week 1. And now we're going to get ready for the main course in the second hour here. Dad, we talked about paydays coming off the top of the show. Payday in the NBA, and one that honestly makes me a little bit sad. Now, we know this doesn't totally eliminate the possibility of what I want, but it at least puts it off into the distance. Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors agree on a 1-year, $62.6 million extension to keep him in Golden State. He had 2 years left on a 4-year deal, and because the NBA has specific over 38 rules that you can't sign a player for longer than 3 years total in the extension, you can't offer, I should say, teams contracts of 4 years or more. They cap Steph Curry at the 3 years they can have him there. He reiterates his stance that he wants to stay as a Golden State Warrior for life. And Dad, I have to figure out more creative ways now to get him and LeBron James on the same team, because that is all I want. It is my fascination for the end of their career, and I won't stop until we get it.
Well, I mean, it was real that the trade deadline, the Warriors were looking in to trade for LeBron James, and it was LeBron James' side that shut that down. He just wanted to be and stay with the Lakers. This extension keeps Curry with Golden State through the 26-27 season. The NBA has more rules. You know, we've never talked so much about the apron and now the over 38 rule. I mean, there are more money rules, but the money that goes around in basketball is absolutely absurd. Just 10 years ago, the cap in the NBA was $63 million for a team. 10 years later, Steph Curry is making $63 million, or will make it in a couple of years. So what a change.
Guys, so his 1-year extension is worth more than the Oakland A's payroll this season. Just something, I mean, doesn't that really just put it in perspective for you? I mean, we know the Oakland A's are, tight wads with their wallet, but still.
It's insane to me, Dad. With this, he also now joins LeBron James and Kevin Durant as the active players that have earned over $500 million in career earnings. So just on basketball, before we get to Steph Curry of Holy Moly fame, the Under Armour shoe deals, all that stuff, this guy is $500 million into an NBA career that we know is one of the greatest all time. It's all richly deserved, but my God, the numbers we are getting up to are insane. And for Steph Curry, again, him and LeBron keep smiling at each other in public like that. You can't make me not love them. I'm sorry. You can't do it.
I know, but Steph seems to want to be Golden State. LeBron seems to want to be the Lakers. So I don't know if the two will ever meet. But you mentioned 3 players now over $500 million. There are 15 players over $400 million in career earnings. And these numbers are going to skyrocket, right? Because the money's not going down in the NBA. It's going to continue to go up. The cap goes up. The numbers go up. We talked about SGA, whenever he can do his extension, could be the first $1 million a game player at $82 million. Not this wouldn't be till I think 2030 or something like that. But to make $1 million a game, the money just keeps going up in the NBA. They are printing it. It's incredible.
I mean, all sports leagues kind of seem to be in, especially when the NBA, the NFL, obviously the WNBA is enjoying a pretty meteoric rise in terms of the attention and the dollars flooding into that sport. I always do wonder, like, how long can it keep going up like this? We talked about it with the private equity stuff in the NFL yesterday, buying in this late in the life cycle of a couple of these leagues, but the money doesn't seem to stop, and Steph Curry gets to pocket a little bit more of it with the Golden State Warriors. So that's exciting news for them. Golden State is pumped about that. They get to figure out now with him and Draymond Green how they want to build around them to try and maximize that window, so Steph wants to stay. Coming up next, let's talk about a place where no one's feeling very good right now. Start spreading the news. There's anxiety in New York today. We'll get to the Jets and Giants' daunting upcoming seasons next on GoJo and Golic. JETS, help us God, seems to be the rallying cry right now heading into a pivotal season for the New York Jets, Dad. We've seen and heard plenty about this team over the last year since Aaron Rodgers came into the fray, and we know as of late, the conversation has actually shifted towards the defensive side of the ball, the side that we thought had everything all sealed up because of what they had put on the field over the last couple of years, but the Hassan Reddick situation still shows no signs of resolving. We had Brandon Aiyuk finally off the books today, CeeDee Lamb. We've been so focused on that, we keep forgetting the Jets have a star pass rusher they traded for this offseason that still has not showed up here. Joe Douglas, their GM, with the latest update on what's going on here.
Nothing's changed from our end. Obviously, a ton of respect first on and awaiting his arrival. And, looking forward to when he does. He's going to be welcomed with open arms.
So, Dad, let me know if this, combined with another headline we saw yesterday, has you worried at all about the Jets' 2024 season more than you might have been, because The Athletic did an anonymous survey of some player agents and people around the league on Thursday and quoted an anonymous NFL agent who expressed belief that the Jets are in a state of turmoil because of Aaron Rodgers. Speaking with Ben Standig of The Athletic, the agent said, quote, "There is complete disarray over there. Look at how they've handled Aaron Rodgers. Has one player had more power than him? He skipped minicamp. They've been unable to convert him into a team player. The vibe in the building is terrible." So when you combine that with what you saw with Hassan Reddick and him obviously not showing up here, the news that we got that Lewis Seen, the safety that was released by the Vikings, was originally going to sign with the Jets practice squad and then went up to Buffalo. Does any of this smell funny to you as we get closer to the actual football?
Well, we know that. Winning is the perfect deodorant, right? Playing well and winning is the deodorant and puts all that stuff aside. I worry about X's and O's on the field. Bryce Huff, their pass rusher, is with the Eagles now, and they tried to replace him with Hassan Reddick, who got traded there, and before he even stepped on the field is asking for another trade. And Joe Douglas is saying, we'll talk, we open him, welcome him back with open arms, as you heard him say. And we're not discussing any kind of extension trade. They said they're not going to trade him any kind of extension until he shows up. And Hassan Reddick isn't showing up. So is Hassan Reddick going to pull the, I'm going to miss, a week or two, give up a week or two of my salary, and then play the leverage game to see how the team does, see how the defense does without him and without Bryce Huff, who the Jets thought they replaced with Hassan Reddick. Now they have neither. The Aaron Rodgers stuff, again, I don't know, you don't have to get along with everybody. As I've always said, no 53 players are all holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Now, does it take on a different sense when it's the leader of the team and the guy with the most power in a long time on that team, and Aaron Rodgers, and is kind of weird, I can't think of a better word, that he can be in some of his statement and some of his actions, missing a mandatory minicamp for a trip to Egypt. But again, winning takes care of all that. If you win, it's the deodorant. But if you lose, it can start a spiral. When you've built everything for this year, and if it starts to not pan out, then you're going to really see a fractured locker room. Fractured before you started playing is one thing. Like I said, you win, everything is hunky-dory. But fractured and then you start losing, that really creates really, really big holes.
Yeah, because that's when it gets real, right? Right now, it's all hypothetical. Aaron Rodgers saying, yeah, I know if I don't perform this year, we're all probably cooked, is accurate, but it gets real once the losing starts, and that feeling seeps into the building where, hey, what was hypothetical before, now we're getting feedback on. Because none of this is surprising or really new to us, Dad, right? We've talked about how weird it is that we've seen Aaron Rodgers and his head coach, Robert Saleh, so publicly not on the same page at important junctures during this offseason. The weird stuff from minicamp, the actual questions about the football team that we know with an older quarterback coming back behind a rebuilt offensive line. all of those things persist. Even the Hassan Reddick stuff, like we talk about him coming over to replace Bryce Huff, who, remember, it wasn't like Bryce Huff was leading this defense in snaps. The bet for Philadelphia was, hey, this is a guy who was incredibly productive in limited reps with the Jets team, and now we want to see what he can do over an expanded sample size. So this doesn't freak me out too much overall, Dad, relative to already my questions about this team going into the season. So let's do the Giants then instead, because that was also a team that, Jesse, we saw the other day, their leadership in front of microphones faced with the reality that their jobs might be on the line this season.
Yeah, so 3 weeks ago, John Mara said he hopes to see significant improvement from his team this year. And that kind of sent a ripple throughout the building. Everybody was talking about it. And Joe Schoen had to answer to the media for these lofty expectations.
Yeah, you guys asked him. You guys had a chance to talk to him. That's he said significant improvement. So you guys talked to the most important person.
What does that mean to you? Did you guys have conversations?
Yeah, again, Dave's not going to approach this job without not saying we want to go out and win. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's why we work our tails off. That's why we were here all night last night doing the waiver cut down. You know, that's why we're out all spring on pro days. That's why we do all the work.
So, guys, Giants enter the season after that disappointing 6-11 record in 2023, and Check's notes have the 5th best odds to have the league's fewest wins. So good luck with that, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting, Dad, looking at that right there with the teams mentioned. New England has the best odds right now to have the fewest wins. This is not a stat you want to be a part of. Followed by the Broncos, the Panthers, the Titans, and then the Giants there. I'm going to be honest. Having the Giants above Denver and Tennessee right now, I don't know if I agree with that based on what we've seen and what we know challenge-wise this team is facing this season.
Yeah, I mean, you let your best player leave in Saquon Barkley. You kept your $60 million man over your $12 million man, and talked about in Hard Knocks in the offseason, talked about getting another quarterback. You have a quarterback who in 22 basically had his best season yardage-wise, completion percentage-wise, just had 15 touchdowns, unlike his rookie year where he had 24, who's average at best, right? You don't have a great receiving crew. Your offensive line you made changes on. Your defense, you did pick up Brian Burns, which certainly should help. But I don't know how, what Mr. Mara saying, I want significant improvement. Where are you getting it from? What on that roster signals, yes, significant improvement for this team? I don't see it.
The one thing I guess you'd point to is Malik Neighbors, who by all accounts through training camp has been that kind of difference maker, and the defensive line. The defensive line is going to be legitimately great, I think. The rest of that defense, we'll see, but that goes a long way in helping out those guys on the back end when you've got a group now that with Brian Burns on one side opposite Kayvon Thibodeau, and oh, by the way, Sexy Dexy in the middle making life miserable for people. That can assuage a lot of the anxiety you have about the rest of that group. But offensively, Dad, it's the same old story with them, kind of like it is with the Jets, is can this group now in front of Daniel Jones keep him clean long enough? The one thing I'll still say is, hey, when Daniel Jones is going to take off and run the way he wasn't going to in the preseason, change the math a little bit on the offense. But I have doubts about what this team is ultimately capable of. And the thing I don't want to see happen, Dad, because we know this is a put up or shut up season for Daniel Jones in terms of this quarterback's future with the organization. They sent that message loud and clear in that offseason Hard Knocks. Brian Daboll now feeling the heat up there along with Joe Schoen. And I think Brian Daboll showed he's a pretty darn good coach that hasn't really been handed a lot to work with so far in his tenure there. And if this season goes south, I have a feeling he's going to be on the chopping block too. And I would hate to see that because I actually think he would be a good guy to still steer this ship into the future.
Yeah, if they don't have a good season, I think there'll be sweeping changes. And I do agree. I think that the strength of this team, not just on either side of the ball, but this team is going to be the D-line with Thibodeau and with Brian Burns as the edge guys. But this was a defense that was bottom 5 last year statistically, and an offense that really if they win, they're gonna have to be low-scoring games because this is an offense that is not gonna be a juggernaut point-wise.
I'm going to be interested to see how the neighbors effect can work on that. But at the very least, hey, Brian Daboll, you look great right now. Glowing in that press conference. The Pilates doing him right. Coming up next, the big slate for the big weekend. College football's week 1 schedule look ahead. Next. Hour number 2 of GoJo and Golic here. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. We are 20 minutes from Holly Rowe joining us. We are 30 minutes from Jordan Brenner joining us, all in the name of looking ahead. Dad, at the end of training camp when I was in college, I used to come in the locker room when we'd break camp, and Never Would Have Made It by Marvin Sapp was playing, this beautiful gospel song that showed us it was the end of camp. We made it. And that's how I feel today. A single tear rolling down my cheek as we now get to look ahead to the week 1 slate of college football games in all of its glory. It's not week 0. It's not Thursday. We got Friday, Saturday, Sunday football coming up this weekend. And so with that in mind, it is time for our college football weekend preview presented by Cheez-It. This college football season, we're feeling the cheesiest with Cheez-It. And I can firmly say, as I've wanted to for quite some time, I woke up feeling cheesiest this morning, Coach, and I'm ready to rock. So, Dad, let's dive into it. Jesse, let's take a look ahead at what is a great weekend. We have got some bangers in every window, by the way, throughout the course of the weekend. If we're talking about Cheez-Its and a tasting menu, you look ahead, you have got cleared out space for a lot of the biggest games of the weekend. So let's start off with what we've got to start off really the college football slate this weekend with Clemson and Georgia, Jesse.
Yeah, okay, number 1, Georgia going into this one with a championship or bust mentality here. Bulldogs are almost a touchdown favorite. All eyes going to be on Heisman hopeful Carson Beck, 5th-year QB, going to be facing a Clemson defense that's returning a lot of their starters and ranked 8th nationally in yards per game last year. So, guys, what are we expecting in this one?
Dad, I'm expecting a good test for a Georgia team that I do think we'll win, and I think we'll cover. The spread was 13.5 originally. I think it's come down to around 12 now, the last I looked on DraftKings Sportsbook. And I think that's the right number. I think ultimately Georgia has what it takes to pull away with a veteran quarterback returning behind an offensive line that really only loses Amarius Mims, and we know he spent a lot of last year hurt for that team. But the big question is going to be life after Brock Bowers. We talked about the other day. Oscar Delp's a really good tight end, but a lot more of that traditional inline tight end versus Brock Bowers that you could put everywhere on that team. So what does that look like against a Clemson defense, Dad, that I don't know. There are things about the Clemson program we can ask questions about. What that group is going to look like is not one of them. TJ Parker was a freshman All-American. Peter Woods is a 6'2", 350-pound likely defensive end for the majority of this season. So that group has been able to hold up their end of the bargain post Brent Venables, but I just think the overall might of Georgia against questions on that Clemson offense probably going to keep this from being a win for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think the matchup is going to be Clemson defense, Georgia offense. Can we take a moment and give some credit? Well, I guess in an era where 43 starting quarterbacks or 43 transfer quarterbacks are starting for 68 Power 4 conference teams, Carson Beck is in his 5th year, all with Georgia. He did not transfer. 3 years as a backup, his 5th year, all with Georgia. I mean, that is unicorn status in today's college football. And now, a Heisman favorite as well. And, Trevor Etienne, the running back, may be suspended for the offseason arrest. As you mentioned, they have to fill the hole of Brock Bowers. So the offense, but they usually reload pretty well. This Clemson defense was 8th in the nation last year, just ahead of Georgia's. And Georgia lost, obviously, in the last couple of years, a ton to the NFL. But up front, Clemson is just known that D-line and linebacker position just playing so strong. But I agree. I just think at the end, Georgia just will have too much. And overall, it's kind of a big number. But I don't see the Clemson offense really being able to produce a ton in this game.
Yeah, as we mentioned, that number's come down to 12 now. So I think it'll be interesting to see what it ends up at kickoff if more and more people look, because, Dad, Cade Klubnik, you talk about continuity. You're absolutely right. Carson Beck and what he's done. He survived on the other side because that was a quarterback room. Brock Vandegrift, who's at Kentucky now, was a part of that room. There was a bunch of high-profile recruits in there, including for a brief moment in time, we thought Dylan Raiola going to make his way over there as well. And Carson Beck comes out the other side. He gets better as the season went along. Last year, really post-Auburn game, that whole offense that, lest we not forget, started off last year with Ladd McConkey banged up, with their running back room also banged up like that. Dylan Bell, who was playing wide receiver for them, now started off the year as an emergency running back for that group. So Georgia last year was not a juggernaut to start the season. A lot of people thought they might have been the best team that just didn't make it because of one bad game against Alabama at the end. But lest we not forget, it was a slow start last year for this Bulldogs team who had to weather the storm without some of their premier weapons. And so that's something they're used to. On the other side, Dad, Cade Klubnik now gets continuity. Another year with Garrett Riley in this offense. Do you think he can take a step forward and look more like the Clemson quarterbacks we've seen in the past?
You heard Dabo Swinney say he wants Cade to use his legs more. He didn't use his legs much last year and wants him to use his legs and be an added threat with his legs. So let's see if that comes to fruition. A guy who's not used to doing that, if he's able to start doing that to go along with his arm. All honesty, I don't have all the confidence in the world in Cade, especially if you're going to start mixing in the run, and especially against a Georgia defense that's normally a very tough defense.
Yep, I'm with you. Hull, a very good quarterback, it seems like right now. Better starter than most college programs, but Clemson has been eating caviar at that position for a while now, and I'm not sure he's going to live up to that taste here. So I'm picking Georgia, and I'm picking them to win with the points. Dad, where are you at with this?
Oh, you're picking the points. I think I will too. I think they'll just wear on them. I think they'll just wear on them, and it'll force Clemson maybe to make a few mistakes in the second half in trying to come back in this game. The thing about it is, man, you just never know in week one. You absolutely just never know. And 12.5 is a big number. But I think I'm going to go with it.
I'd say 12 too. And a big difference, 13.5
12.
where it's a full 2 touchdowns versus now a touch and a kick all of a sudden can get you over late. I think that's enough for me to feel pretty comfortable here. So we both picking the dogs with that one. Jesse, what do we got for the next game up?
Yeah, so next up we have number 19 Miami versus Florida in the Swamp. Hurricanes have high expectations in the ACC, especially with FSU dropping their season opener to Georgia Tech. Now listen to this. Florida has won 33 consecutive home openers, an NCAA leading streak, but Miami 2.5-point favorite on the road. So are they going to snap the Gators streak tomorrow? What do we think?
Yeah, and Dad, lest we think that's all cupcakes, we know a couple of years ago, Utah strolled in there with Cam Rising in this group right now that we expect to win the Big 12 championship and beat them there. Now, that was the Anthony Richardson-led Florida Gators. This is Graham Mertz's show, a completely different outfit. So where are you at on this game, Dad, as we head into another, we call this the Anxiety Bowl. We talked to Andy Staples about this the other day. He called it the Pitchforks and Torches game.
I mean, you look at Billy Napier, 11-14 over the last 2 years. Cristobal, 12-13 over the last 2 years. Neither living up to the expectations of those schools. I know it's in Florida. It's at the Swamp. I felt like the number was too low at 2.5. Maybe I'm just riding on the on paper, which I know is tough to do. The on paper for Miami is somewhat stunning. The last 3 recruiting classes, the last couple of portal classes, Cam Ward coming over at the quarterback position. Now, all those positions have to gel. It's like Florida State had a bunch of portal guys and didn't gel in the first game against Georgia Tech in Ireland. So there is that fear that because there are no preseason games, that all that new talent doesn't gel. But I think Miami is actually really in a good position to vie for the ACC title, and I like him, and I'll give the points in this one.
I will too, and this is, like you said, this is one of those games difficult to handicap the start of the year. Now, Graham Mertz, couple of years in that system down there. They're getting Montrell Johnson back, who had, I think, a knee scope at the beginning of training camp, but he's been with Billy Napier since the ULL days, so very familiar with this. You've got some of that, but the defense was just a non-starter last year, and I think this Miami team, Mario Cristobal's got the dogs up front now to go out and be able to hunt with Cam Ward at the helm. So I'll take Miami as well. I'll give the 2.5 on the road. They're road favorites in this game, which tells you something about the way this Miami program is perceived. But we also know, even though Florida doesn't have a number next to their name, that only means so much at the beginning of the season. So I could see this being tight. I could see this being a field goal game as Miami works this out. And Mario Cristobal, got to get out with a clean sheet. Got to show everybody that you got that in you. All right, Dad, let's rip off the Band-Aid. Jesse, let's get to the game I've been dreading talking about for weeks now.
Your alma mater opening this season as a 3-point road dog to Texas A&M. So Aggies head coach Mike Elko making his debut against new Irish quarterback and his former quarterback at Duke, Riley Leonard. So guys, you got to talk about it. Is that familiarity going to give the advantage to Mike Elko and the Aggies tomorrow? What do we think?
Oh, I think definitely them knowing Riley Leonard, knowing what he could do, and throwing the fact the weakest part of this Notre Dame team is the offensive line. And even before the injury to the new left tackle, it was already 2 new tackles. I mean, they were revamping. Joe Rudolph has his work cut out for him, the O-line coach at Notre Dame. They have a true freshman now starting at left tackle against a second-team AP All-American, Nick Scorton, the kid from Purdue who came over in the portal, 285-pounder. So that to me is going to be the scene here. The D-line for Texas A&M against the basically brand-new offensive line for Notre Dame. Now, I do think the running ability of Riley Leonard will help offset what would be, on paper, a disadvantage for Notre Dame. So I do think Riley Leonard being used in the running game to make it 11-on-11 at times is going to be a big help. On the other side, Connor Wegman, the quarterback for Texas A&M, a good quarterback, but the defense for Notre Dame, I mean, from Mills up front, Cross up front, Kaiser at the linebacker position, Xavier Watts at safety, Benjamin Morrison at corner. This defense is stacked, so they can keep that quarterback in check. Also, throw in the really, they're not intangibles, they're tangibles. Could be a hot night. Could be a check of depth of guys having to come in and spell starters for a bit because if it's going to be a hot night. So you could be getting an early look at depth and young players coming in and playing a little bit as well.
Well, that's the thing I'd say for Notre Dame defensively, more depth than they've had in quite some time. That's an advantage there. The D-line's going to be able to roll deep from what we've heard from Al Washington in the media. And then offensively, they think they've got 2 full hockey line changes of capable receivers now that they've gone and portaled there. To me, Dad, this game is going to be a lot more about Mike Denbrock than it even is on Riley Leonard. How much can Mike Denbrock do formation-wise, schematically, with the play calling? You mix in screens, the zone read, running Riley Leonard to try and account for and take some of the teeth off that Texas defensive front. Because, we've talked about Nick Scorton, but Tarian York at linebacker I thought was a great player as a freshman last year for them that could give them plenty of trouble. This is a deep running back room for Notre Dame next to Riley, who's also going to get the benefit of now. That's the one thing I think that's popped about every soundbite out of Notre Dame's training camp from the players talking about Riley Leonard is the playmaking athleticism. It sounds like, and if he's fully healthy, we know he had the procedure this offseason, missed a lot of spring football. If he's fully healthy and can do all that, Mike Elko knows best. When Riley Leonard can rush, that changes your entire offense because of what he affords you as a guy who's a legitimate basketball-style athlete. So, Dad, Notre Dame getting points on the road, I'm inclined to take them. I think this Texas A&M offense is the biggest unknown. It's what I'm most excited to talk to Holly Rowe about when she joins us from what she's seen so far. We've heard a lot about Notre Dame's offense, not nearly as much about this Texas A&M offense that in a small sample size is seeing good from their quarterback, but we really still don't know against upper echelon competition what it's going to look like. I'm inclined to take Notre Dame +3. The real bet in this game is the under 46, the point total. I think both these defenses could make this thing a tough one to go for both offenses.
Yeah, I would agree. I would take Notre Dame, and I'll definitely take the points. I see Riley Leonard breaking out of the pocket and being that running threat, kind of putting the Texas A&M defense on their heels. And you look at Sam Hartman came in last year to be the quarterback of Notre Dame. Riley Leonard's got more weapons. Chris Mitchell, the transfer portal guy. Bo Collins, the portal guy. Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, Mitchell Evans back at tight end, one of the top tight ends in the country. So and Notre Dame we know is going to run the ball as well. But Riley Leonard has definite weapons to throw to as well.
He does. And so how do you use them to help the offensive line grow into themselves in an environment where you talk about the heat? I think about the noise, communication up front for a group that is freshman, redshirt sophomore, who some of them got action last week and a couple of them in Death Valley. When you look at, the center, the right guard, those are guys that played on the road at Clemson, which is not an easy place to play. That communication for that group going to be paramount. And it's why we've heard them blaring music at practice and trying to make all that happen. So this will be a fun one to talk more about with Holly Rowe coming up in a little bit. But you and I both rolling with Notre Dame +3 on the road in a game that should be a very interesting test and showcase for both teams. Jesse, let's finish this off with Sunday night football in college. USC and LSU out in Las Vegas. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, so this was agreed to before the Trojans left for the Big Ten. LSU is a 4-point favorite on the road, and the Trojans are meeting an opponent from the Southeastern Conference for the first time since losing 52-6 to Alabama in 2016. So here we go. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, Dad, this fascinating. First off, just these two fan bases in Las Vegas at the same game is fascinating to me. I cannot wait to see the shots of the LSU tailgaters out in Las Vegas raising holy hell, because I believe they're going to win the tailgate overwhelmingly. USC is not equipped to fight in this one before we get to the game.
Yeah, and you have both quarterbacks, Garrett Nussmeier and Miller Moss, both only had their first starts in the bowl games last year because they were playing behind Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, the top two quarterbacks in the draft. So inexperience from the quarterback position. LSU has a trio of running backs, so they can certainly rely on their running game. They have athletic talent. Will Campbell, the tackle, going to be one of the best in the country on the offensive line for LSU. I just think LSU will have too much for USC with their athletes in this one.
I would agree. I'm inclined to pick, and you mentioned it there, though. The athletes are one thing, and they're replacing that slew that we've talked about. But I point to the guys that you talked about up front on that offensive line, bookending with tackles you can trust. For a quarterback that, you're right, Garrett Nussmeier, 395 yards versus Wisconsin in the ReliaQuest Bowl, going up against Miller Moss, who threw 6 touchdown passes in the Holiday Bowl. This is really, we talk about what bowl season means anymore. This will be the real test of who can come out there and actually translate that success in these games where you're missing players and there's all these variables in the roster during a time of year that's more upheaval than ever in new college football. Who's actually going to be able to take that and translate it into some newness there? The one thing I will say, Dad, is USC meaningfully invested in defense, and we've talked about continuity a lot. I think it's as important as ever in college football. Miller Moss has been there, and Lincoln Riley is also the same guy calling plays. Now, we talked to Garrett Nussmeier, their quarterback coach, got elevated to offensive coordinator, so it's a familiar enough voice, but Mike Denbrock is gone there now. We just talked about him in South Bend. So do you worry about that at all for another voice now potentially in Garrett's ear before that season starts as a fly in the ointment?
I mean, certainly with a new starting quarterback who just had the one game, albeit a good game, you worry about a new signal caller, and with again no preseason games, and it being the first game, good on good. This isn't a FCS team against an FBS team. So you worry about that. But as I said, they have a couple of senior running backs. They have a sophomore running back who played in all 13 games last year. So you can rely on the run and defense. Harold Perkins leads the way for that LSU defense to put pressure on Moss. So I just think LSU overall has too much for SC.
We have focused a lot on the USC defense over the last year. That LSU defense was BAD bad last year. They brought in the old Missouri defensive coordinator now to try and shore that up. So how Harold Perkins is deployed, we know is a question always on the mind for LSU fans and college football fans at large. But there are a lot of questions, similar questions for both teams in terms of the quarterbacks and the defensive improvement that we're going to see take place in the desert. Dad, I'm going to pick LSU and give the points in this one. Where are you?
Oh, I'm picking LSU and give it the points as well. I think we're the same on all of them.
And usually when the graphic looks
screwed.
the same for all the picks, that's not good news for anyone. So we'll see if we need to fade ourselves heading into week 1 already. So coming up next, we're going to enlist some help with that. Jordan Brenner from the Underdogs podcast here at Meadowlark and the DraftKings Network going to join us as we try and figure out who might be able to get the job done, not only this weekend, but overall, the dark horses to pay attention to in college football in 2024 next. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. And as we've talked about, we picked the games on the big slate going into this weekend. Decided to make you guys some content over on the DraftKings Sportsbook if you want to check it out in that regard as well. Weekend parlay. Going to do this every week now on the show and over on the DraftKings Sportsbooks app that you guys can check out for our Cash It or Trash It edition today. Cash It or Trash It is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. And we got it up on the sportsbook right now. I got the 4-team parlay for week 1, Dad. We already talked about it. Georgia minus 13.5, which now has come down to 12. So Yahoo for everyone there. Notre Dame getting 3 on the road against Texas A&M. Penn State to win outright against West Virginia on the road there. And LSU to win straight up against USC in that game as well. So you can go and check that out. Made it for you. Set it and forget it over on the sportsbook there. But to help us talk about more teams that we could be looking at, not only just this weekend as underdogs, but over the long season here. Jordan Brenner, one of the co-hosts of the Underdogs podcast, is part of Meadowlark Media here at the DraftKings Network. Kind enough to join us now. Jordan, happy week 1, man. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here with you guys, and happy week 1 to you all too.
Yeah. It's an exciting time. We have made it through the wilderness. And Jordan, we know you guys have done a lot and look at all sports over on Underdogs, but I thought it was interesting looking ahead to this season. You guys took a look formulaically at what tends to make the best season-long dark horses underdog, the thing people always are looking for, whether it's laying down money or who to sound smart with and their friends. So take me through. You wrote an article for The Athletic about this process of determining 7 teams that in your mind think can actually maybe threaten the college football playoffs this year. So how'd you get to this point and who'd you wind up with?
Yeah, so the first thing, which is interesting, right, is everyone thinks that college football is kind of formulaic, that the top teams are the top teams. But if you look at teams that were unranked in the preseason poll and then cracked the top 10 by the final college football pool, because a top 10 in 2017 probably should translate to being top 10 this year and making the playoff, there's usually at least one, often 2 or 3 teams a year. So someone's going to come out of nowhere and be a top 10 playoff team. It just happens every year. So we wanted to say, well, what are some trends among those teams? And we found some. So first of all, they've always come from a power conference. So that immediately whittled it down to 43 unranked power conference teams that we were looking among, right? Well, then they had some similar things and qualities. They were underdogs, but not huge, crazy underdogs, right? They'd all won 4 games the year before. They all had betting lines no worse than, I think, plus 35,000. So it wasn't crazy 100,000 to 1 long shots to win the national championship. One of the coolest things I thought was they all had a new head coach or coordinator or second-year guy. So there was some new blood on the staff, some sort of triggering situation there. They all had 3 top 5 recruiting classes in the last 4 years, at least. And they couldn't be too good. So think of Washington, right? 14 wins the year before. Generally, if you're a 14-win team, you're going to be ranked again the next season unless something really weird and drastic happened, like losing your head coach and your whole roster. So when you finish that exercise, you're left with 7 teams for this year.
All right, so you've left with 7 teams. Yeah, go ahead, Dad. Sorry.
I was going to say, and one of those teams that caught my eye was Nebraska. Now, I know the defense improved a bit last year, but they're starting a true freshman quarterback. So how did that go into the computing?
It didn't, to be perfectly honest. Now, it's computed in the fact that it's part of a strong recruiting class, right? But we looked at quarterbacks, and there wasn't necessarily much rhyme or reason to what year a quarterback was in of those teams that had big turnaround seasons. So all we're saying is that Nebraska checks a lot of boxes. And if I had to put money on where will an underdog come from, I'd say one of those 7 teams. So for the full list, it's 3 SEC teams. It's Auburn, Florida, Kentucky. You've got Louisville out of the ACC, Nebraska, Wisconsin out of the Big Ten, and in a little bit of deja vu, TCU back there, once again coming off a 5-7 season, and I don't know about the strength of the Big 12, and maybe something hits. So look, each of these teams on their own seems kind of ridiculous to be saying right now they're going to be a college football playoff team, because if we thought they'd be a college football playoff team, we'd already have them in the preseason top 25, if not the top 15. So we're looking at what ingredients are there for something weird to happen.
So we've gotten the ingredients laid out on the table. You mentioned the 7 teams that are potentially falling into these categories that have traditionally led to underdogs. We talked about Nebraska already. Outside of them, as these teams came forward and this process you went through, who jumped out to you as like, oh, I actually think they might be able to do this, given what I know about the squad?
Well, like I said, I thought there was some precedent with TCU. They've got 10 of 22 starters back. They got another top 50 class. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. And I don't think the Big 12 is that strong. We're like, guys, I don't know. You know a lot more about football than I do. You played football. But sometimes I think teams get good and then they win. But I also think sometimes teams win and it helps them get good, if that makes any sense. If you start off strong, if you get a little momentum, suddenly you're 3-0 and 4-0 and you're cooking with something different than you had early in the season. It takes you into tougher opponents a little more confident. So I think you could see that from TCU. We talked a little bit about the 3 SEC teams and just the gauntlet of trying to run through that conference, and it's so hard. But GoJo, I think you and I agree that of those 3, Auburn might have the most variance in their in just their profile. So I think they're interesting to look at. And I wouldn't, I don't think you liked Louisville as much as I did. Like I said, I'm always partial to 25-year-old starting quarterbacks, but they won 10 games last year. Good coach, and there's a lot there.
I wonder about Florida, A, being in the SEC, and B, starting off with Miami, a tough start. You talked about starting out like 3-0 and building your confidence. They could be starting out 0-1.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think I probably have the least confidence in Florida of this group just because of that ridiculous schedule they have. But I do think there is probably more going on there than some people realize in terms of talent building. Graham Mertz is not a bad quarterback. 20 touchdowns last year, 3 interceptions. I think, if you swap them with TCU and put them in the Big 12, I think you might really have something. But I'm with you guys. There's just too many pitfalls on the road there for them.
Yeah, and you mentioned on the road playing at Texas A&M after this game in a couple of weeks, on the road at Neyland playing Tennessee in the middle of the season, and then on the road at DKR to play Texas late in the season, along with the Florida State Seminoles, which who knows what that team's going to look like. But I think the snapshot everyone saw was that 5-game stretch to end the year where it goes Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and then Florida State. That will chew up and spit out most teams in college football and have them scratching their heads. So Florida, but spin that around. Opportunities for big wins should that talent put it all together. Again, you guys can check out Jordan as a part of the Underdogs show. Great podcast, great show here at Meadowlark and the DraftKings Network. Going to try and have Jordan on a lot more this football season as we get ready for some fun ones. So thank you, brother. We appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the first week.
Thanks.
Yeah, Dad, we've made a lot of that 5-game stretch at the end of the year for Florida, and the more I look at it now, Georgia and Texas, we obviously expect to be there. They're the favorites to win the SEC title game. LSU, we're going to learn a lot about in week 1. The Sunday standalone game, Brian Kelly is no stranger to, tends to inform a lot of opinions. Ole Miss, big expectations for a team that traditionally portals. And Florida State now, we have some questions. So all of a sudden, coming off week 1, I think for at least 2 of those 5 games, we could have a bit of a different feel about for Florida overall, depending on what they do against Miami.
Yeah, and again, coming right out of the gate with no preseason games, although they have a great home opening season record, I think it's going to be a tough one here. Jordan does bring up a great point. He said they're always going to be a surprise team, always going to be, and that's the fun of trying to decide who or what group that team can come from.
Yeah, again, Auburn feels like the one that jumps off the page just because we know Hugh Freeze's experience in that league, the nature of the offense, returning production at quarterback, all these things. But it is the thing we love about the sport is it's so hard to predict. Coming up next, though, we'll ask Rowe to give us a little bit of inside info on the big matchup of the weekend, Notre Dame at Texas A&M, next on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Dad, we've talked a lot about college football this weekend already. We're getting ready to talk to the great Holly Rowe, 29th season covering the sport, Emmy Award-winning college football reporter, one of our favorite teammates, obviously, from our time at the Worldwide Leader, one of the best doing it. Going down into an environment where, for her especially, down on the sidelines in College Station, we've heard about the noise there. I'm curious for you, Dad, what's the loudest stadium you've ever been in, as a player, as a broadcaster, anything like that, for what she's getting prepared for?
Well, I mean, I personally never had to worry about the noise being on the defensive side of the ball. You know, it was always our offense on the road that had to worry about the noise. And it was certainly in college that it would be louder than an NFL stadium. It would definitely be in college. Probably be down. We played LSU my senior year down in Death Valley, and that would probably be one of the loudest. But again, I never had to deal with the loud. You did. That's what I was going to ask you, the same thing. You were a center, so you had to snap the ball. Obviously, you do it on a silent count, but the loudest game for you.
It does. It presents a lot of interesting issues for communication. So as we bring in Holly Rowe, who's going to be on the call for this, along with Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit Saturday night at 7:30 Eastern. Holly, how do you get ready to be on the sidelines in all these big-time atmospheres you're going to be where noise is going to be such a factor?
Yeah, I actually had to buy these double molded earpieces. You know, usually in TV you wear this one earpiece, but I have been using double earpieces for years because it does get really loud. And sometimes it gets so loud you can kind of like feel it in the bones of your chest. You're like rattling. You're like, this is crazy. And I actually talked to the offensive lineman for Notre Dame because they have a really intriguing situation happening. Ashton Craig is going to be their center, but they have a true freshman straight out of high school, Anthony Knapp at left tackle. And so I had a long chat with the offensive lineman, like, how are you guys going to communicate? And I went through their silent cadence with them, how they're going to do it, because it is going to be loud. And for a lot of these guys, it will be their first college football game. And so I think that's going to be a huge story, is the offensive line, how they communicate and how they hold up against Texas A&M.
Yeah, it's one thing to turn the music up on the practice field and make it be loud and go through your silent cadence and all that on the practice field. But when the bright lights are on and the stadium's thumping and it's for real, it's a little different. Holly, how do you see like these first games? Like, there's no preseason in college, as you know, but when you have really good on good in the first games of the season, of what determines the outcomes?
I think we saw a lot of that last night. Thursday night, a lot of good games kicked off, and we saw a lot of teams really struggle in the first half. I thought Colorado struggled in the first half. They kind of looked like they were getting outplayed by North Dakota State. And then in the second half, it's like, okay, we know what we're doing. There are jitters. There are missed assignments. There are missed tackles. I have found that missed tackles is maybe the biggest story of most opening weekends, because you're just not used to. They don't tackle like they used to in practice anymore because of injury risks. So I do think that it's really hard. You know, NFL preseason at least gets to wrap up a guy before they have to count a win or a loss. So I think it's hard for college football. But I know coaches are trying to do, simulate live tackling. I was at LSU day before yesterday at football practice. And I mean, they were allowing the DBs to take the wide receivers to the ground on pass routes. And, it was getting pretty physical. And I was like, oh, this is physical for a Wednesday practice. But then I was like, I think you have to, in this day and age, kind of get some as if live reps, because it's going to be physical in Vegas when they play USC.
There's no doubt it is a unique challenge that coaches are trying to navigate right now. And for Texas A&M on defense, they're going to have to do that now with a quarterback, taking him to the ground, and Riley Leonard, who's been the subject of a lot of conversation for Notre Dame. But Holly, I want to venture over to the other side. What have you heard as you guys have talked to Texas A&M and their staff about Connor Wegman, who we know has some history starting for them, but then had so much of that robbed due to injury last season?
Yeah, full disclosure, I actually have a meeting with Connor in about an hour, so we haven't talked to him yet. But I know Coach Elko very well. I'm a huge fan of his work. When he was here at Texas A&M, earlier with Jimbo Fisher as the defensive coordinator, he made an immediate impact on this defense. They were so good. In fact, I remember them playing Texas A&M at Clemson one year, and the adjustments that Mike Elko made, I remember texting him after the game like, dude, I am like your biggest fan right now, because if you really know and can see in-game adjustments, it was like a chess masterpiece that Mike Elko was putting on, and he is really, really good. I love the guy. I think they're going to be physical. I think they'll be fast. You know, Texas A&M can recruit, and I before he got injured, Connor Wigman was one of the best players. I think he was the #1 overall rated drop back passer in that recruiting class before he had those injuries each year. So he has a lot of upside, a lot of potential. He's just got to stay healthy. You know, they have some changes up front on their offensive line. So I really think the trenches are going to be an interesting place to watch.
How much of an advantage, if any, do you think there can be for Texas A&M and the fact that Mike Elko knows Riley Leonard so well?
There's going to be a little bit of an advantage, because if you think about it, Mike Elko knows his weaknesses more than anyone, right? You're the one that was working with this quarterback all these years, game planning for him. So you know his strengths and weaknesses. I will say this, watching Riley, I went to Notre Dame practice for 2 days last week. He looks good. And I talked to Riley and I said, hey, do you have any benefit? Because you know how Mike Elko thinks, and you have gone up against Mike Elko defenses for the last couple of years. You know how they like to do things. He said, I do think I'll have some familiarity. I do think I know a little bit, but the personnel is very different here at Texas A&M than Duke. So I think that's going to be a big factor. But Riley looks great. He is not wearing a brace on that ankle. He was moving around well. He was ripping off some quarterback runs. I don't think they're going to run him like we saw Duke in the past. I think they've got a little bit more surrounding him. But, man, he looked really good. He's confident. And if you've ever spoken to him, he's literally the best kid in America. Like, he is the greatest kid in America. I'm a huge fan of his work. And, you know, maybe the biggest question mark for him will be staying healthy and then just improving on the long ball.
Yeah, that's certainly a huge storyline for him, and a sigh of relief for Notre Dame fans to hear that he's looked that healthy in practice. Holly, I'm curious, as you were around that team and that program, though, lots of pressure on Marcus Freeman. Year 3 at that program, his identity firmly stamped, and an expanded playoff, a belief that they should be one of those teams. So how is Marcus Freeman managing that pressure and those expectations in South Bend?
Marcus Freeman has grown into this job in such a cool way. So, you know, he gets elevated. He's a young defensive coordinator. And at the time, I'm like, wow, this is a big job for him as defensive coordinator when he went over with Brian Kelly. And then in a matter of months, he gets elevated to be the head coach. It's a wild story if you really think about it. He's 38 years old right now. I mean, he's younger than most of the coordinators in Division I college football. But watching him grow into the role from when I've had meetings with him in his first year, last year, and then spending 2 days there with that team. And they let me do everything. I got to go to team meals. I got to sit in on their team meetings. And I cannot tell you how impressive he is. He is commanding these meeting rooms. He is commanding practice. The practice I was there, he ripped the guy, you know, he gathers everybody up, and he is in a really kind of positive, cool way, like ripping guys, like, you have to do your job. Figure out how you get your job done on every play. There's no, oh, I'll get it on the next rep. It is on this rep. Like, I just loved his command of that team. I think it's been very cool to watch him grow into his own leadership style and where he's commanding this team. And I think Notre Dame looks really good. They're skilled players. They are loaded at wideout. I was sitting there trying to figure out, like, who's going to be their best wideout. I don't know yet. They have so many options. I think they're good at running back. They've got depth there, and then their tight ends are monsters. So yeah. I'm kind of buying the Irish right now. I'm all in on the Irish.
Holly, you get that full access because you're the best at what you do, and we worked together years ago. You haven't aged, and I am like a full gray beard now. I mean, it's amazing.
I was waiting for you guys to let me have the geek out moment, because I was like, this is such a cool thing for me. So I got to work with Mike Golic the very first couple of years I was doing sports. And I remember us going around the country together. We had some cool games. That's when Illinois was really good, remember? And we had some good things. So I'm geeking out. I love you both so much, and I'm really excited you had me on.
We love you,
Thanks,
Holly.
Holly.
Thank you so much. Have a great call this weekend. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you again and see you this season on the road. Thank you. All right, guys, let's finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you into the weekend. Week 1 of college football. I love you guys. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, all the fun places. If you got to miss us live or any of our great guests, and thank you to Jordan Brenner from the Underdogs podcast and the great Holly Rowe, who's going to be on the call on the sidelines for Notre Dame at Texas A&M this weekend. You can check that out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. All right, guys. Let's start off with this. Surprise, surprise. I think Scottie Scheffler might still be good at golf. He started off the Tour Championship with a 2-shot lead based after his dominant season. He then took over on Thursday. He went a best round 6 under 65 to build now a 7-shot lead. And looks like, Dad, he's on his way to $25 million that comes with winning that FedEx Cup title. Ho-hum for the guy that's been the face of golf this season.
So didn't it, this is the 6th year of the starting strokes where he led the FedEx Cup. So he starts at 10 under. Xander Schauffele was second, so he's at 8 under, and then so on. It drops down. And after the first hole, it was even. The first hole, they played together. Xander Schauffele birdies the first hole, and Scheffler bogeys the first hole. So they're both at 9 under. You figure, okay, 1 hole in, we got a race. And then, as you mentioned, Scheffler birdies 5 of the last 7 holes and takes a 7-stroke lead. He is just flat out people are going to say we got to do something about this, but you know what? He's flat out the best golfer in the world right now. And when you're leading in the FedEx points, you have to have some kind of advantage. So this is the advantage you have. And the money has grown over these years too of what you're going to win. He's going to pocket a whole bunch of money. This caddy's going to be really happy.
I think it's just one of those things, though, Dad, where this is the third time Scotty's gone into this as the leader with that start, and he hasn't won it yet. So it's not like this has been some rampant problem where he's Georgia football of golf. He's in the middle of an historically great season. Xander Schauffele pushed him, got the 2 major wins, got over the hump, but at the end of the day, we're just seeing one of those force of nature years where Scotty Scheffler, now imbued with dad strength, is gone out there and dominating. And to your point, already made $37.2 million and adding 25 on top of that if he wins this. It's good work if you can get it for the best ball striker in the game right now. And as someone that just got a fresh set of PXG irons, I'm hoping I'll look more like Scotty soon, but I don't know if that's... I felt like Scotty Scheffler the other day playing at a course around here, but got a long way to go before I can do the things that man's done in golf this year.
Think about if he hits this 25 mil. That'll be over $62 million made on the course. His caddy gets at least 10%. That's over $6 million for the caddy. I'd like to see where the caddy falls on the actual money list of golfers for the year. For the caddy in the money list of actual golfers. I mean, that's just stunning.
That's now you see why that kid worked so hard to be Mr. Gilmore's caddy, because he saw the potential of what his life could be like. His work getting choked out on the green. So a lot of great stuff going on there. But Jesse, the WNBA got their big time rookie matchup that's about to do box office numbers once again.
Yeah, Scotty Scheffler can take those winnings and buy a ticket to the Sky Fever game, okay? It's the most expensive WNBA game on record. So as of last night, the average ticket price is $334. That's a 16% increase from their June matchup. It's also 159% more expensive than the Sky's average home game purchase price. The current get-in price is $165. That's 84% more expensive than the get-in price of this past season's Chicago Bulls home opener. So the biggest purchase is a 3-ticket combo worth $24.60. Average ticket price of $820. This is crazy, you guys. The people cannot get enough. And just so you know, also the Sky have a new mascot, so that's pretty cool. It's a lioness, but yeah, the new mascot will be there too.
I mean, the new mascot's got a long way to go if it's going to catch up to the Liberty mascot, Ellie the Elephant, who is walking into every arena with more sauce than half the players, it feels like. Ellie has become an institution there. But, Dad, this is the game. I mean, if you're the WNBA, obviously, we've talked about it. There's tons of great players in this league. A'ja Wilson's in the middle of another MVP season. The Liberty have been great. The Sun, all these teams have showed up. There's great players. This is the future that you're trying to nurture, right? These two as rivals going into the next decade plus of WNBA basketball.
Yeah, it definitely is with Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. And right now, the distance is probably with 7, 8, 9 games left. Distance probably a little too much at 3.5 games. Now, it certainly could happen that Indiana is in 7th ahead of Chicago's at 8th. Chicago could fall out. They're just a game ahead of the Atlanta Dream and in the 9th slot, and only the top 8 make the playoffs. So Chicago's trying to hang on to that last playoff spot. So a big game for them. Obviously big for the league, as Jesse mentioned, by the ticket prices, but certainly a big game for Chicago and their playoff chances.
There's no doubt big for them, the Fever on that track. We talked about the effects on the ticket sales for this game. We know the Fever, before the league returned from the Olympic break, put out a mid-season report showing just the jump in popularity around this team in particular. A 1,193% increase in jersey sales, a 264% increase in ticket sales, on and on down this list, 225% increase in corporate partnerships. All of it has been a rising tide, helping lift the ships along with the works of a lot of other people.
Yeah, and again, we went through the rocky part of the beginning of the season of Caitlin Clark and the angst of the veterans and some of the non-basketball issues that were going on. And it has definitely calmed down to be about basketball now, right? About the best player in the game in A'ja Wilson, the Rookie of the Year in Caitlin Clark, the rebounding machine of Angel Reese, and all the storylines in between that are on the court now.
Yeah, everyone found out there's room enough for everyone to get the ball. People are doing a better job, and shout out to the women especially that have been covering the W for so long that are continuing to elevate the game in that way. But yeah, Caitlin Clark also just started playing better basketball. She got through some of that initial rough stuff and now is setting rookie record after rookie record along with Angel Reese, who's been a double-double monster. It's been fun to see and will continue to be going forward. Jesse, let's get to the third with probably the most important news we buried this late in the show. Capri Sun. I just don't even know how to look at them anymore after what the changes they've made.
Okay, so food blog Snackalator, yes, I'm saying that correctly. It leaks product drops, okay? So they shared an image of what is bottles of Capri Sun. You heard me, bottles. So a lot of Snackalator's leaks have come true in the past. There's no official confirmation from Capri Sun yet, but you can see our traditional pouch with the attached straw is gone, and now we have bottles instead. And GoJo, I know this is hitting you right in the feels.
So this is a big nostalgia play. There's no doubt. And to your point, this feels like a trial balloon thing where maybe Capri Sun floating this out there to see just how strong the reaction or press is going to be. I know I'm partial to the pouch, but Jesse, you brought this up yesterday, especially as someone who's a mom and thinks about this differently, that this actually is kind of a win for the momming community.
Yeah, like the pouches with those sharp straws, you could kill someone with one of those straws. Very inconvenient. And then once you put the straw in, there's lots of spillage because little kids are like squeezing the pouch and the juice is going everywhere. Yep. So I don't know. I saw this as a parent and I was like, I don't hate it.
Although kids do love pouches. They put them in everything, that yogurt and stuff, so they can squeeze it out. Yeah. I see why they do it for kids.
There is nostalgia to it, but it just makes more sense to be in the bottle with the cap you can put back on, store it without the spillage, without the kids squeezing it, without the tipping it over and having the liquid drip out, or even getting the stinking stick, the sharp end in the, to break through the material. It can be a pain, especially for little kids, but there is nostalgia in it. There is nostalgia to have it squirt out of the straw and make a little bit of a mess is kind of expected.
Easier to pack, and quite honestly, I don't know if Capri Sun is a good enough drink to exist with the other bottle dwellers here. The pouch is kind of the selling point in a lot of ways for that nostalgia, and so I'm just saying, maybe this is where I go full boomer and decide back in my day things were better and we used to stand for something. But damn it, back in my day things were better and we used to stand for something in the late 90s and early 2000s. Hopefully you think we stand for something around here. If you do, download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Have a great weekend. Enjoy college football being all the way back. We'll talk to you Monday.